Welcome back to the Connected podcast. It's the re-recording we did with James Robson. James had many interesting roles and has some passion projects around the use of data in a public space, and also has some very interesting thoughts on AI and trust models. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Welcome back to the Connected podcast. We are on episode 3, which we're re-recording. We had some technical issues with James, so we're now back and re-recording from the start because it was such an interesting podcast, and we wanted to make sure that we got all the bits that we think you'll enjoy listening to. So first things first, I'm going to let James just reintroduce himself. So thanks for being on the podcast, James. Appreciate your time. Tell us all about yourself.
Alex, Ralph, thank you so much for having me on the pod. Yeah, so I've been in data protection for the last 10 years, sort of end of 2016, beginning of 2017. But before that, I was in IT security sales and ran a desk as a sales manager and employed people there and trained people there, which is where I picked up a bunch of skills that were kind of handy for data protection. And before that, I was in television, but to kind of augment it all during the beginnings of my GDPR journey, I also became a qualified yoga teacher. So yes, an interesting, curious background.
Yeah, that does sound very varied, actually. But I really want to start off by focusing in on your roles around data protection. How have you seen that role develop over the last decade?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I started as one of the sort of jump on the bandwagon GDPR consultants, if you like, and really enjoyed that. And so really saw what that role has become. And over the years, I jumped into an organization as a data protection specialist, a big kind of globalized multinational psychometric testing firm, and then became DPO after that. And up until November of last year, I was data protection officer for the UK Labour Party. Now, the whole ecosystem of data protection as a job that you can do is completely changed. I mean, it wasn't really a thing that would advise boards. It wasn't really understood properly. The whole job didn't really exist. And so we've seen it become its whole sort of ecosystem in its own right. And it's become what am I trying to say? It's become a profession in its own right, the DPO. And over the years, as people have realized things have become more digital, they've become more online, it's been needed to help augment senior leadership teams and security teams to understand, well, what we're allowed to do with data and what we're not allowed to do. And that's really become part of the day-to-day understanding of how personal data is used by the general public. And so there's this expectation that there is someone there that is looking after that data. So I guess that's the development, really. It's almost from there wasn't really much to now there's a lot, and it's a profession in its own right with its whole kind of set of conferences and things. Yeah.
Do you think it's gone from? Sorry, go for it.
I was just going to ask, do you think it's the expansion of the digital environment that's really made senior managers and leaders sit up and take notice, and that's why the role is kind of being brought into much more of those higher level discussions?
No, I don't. I think it's the law. I think it was the fact that GDPR was just thrust in front of us. And then you had that, if you remember, sort of around about May 2018, the amount of emails that came around updating privacy policies and notices and having to accept things and that kind of stuff. I think it's the law has driven that. And the law has been a reaction to that digital landscape. And then that's fed into each other, and so now it is a board level problem because there are breaches every day. You know, there are things going on to be aware of that could undermine the bottom line, but also put people at risk as well. And so I think it's because of the law, but now it's become front and center because of the digital landscape becoming so vast. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, that you see these breaches and then you see that it all comes out behind it that people have tried to bring the board on, the board's kind of refused the money, and and I think a lot of that's come out where there's been a sort of maybe a lack of a duty of care or a lack of focus on these things. And I don't think anybody wants to be in that public position as the people that turned down some investment requests and then got absolutely hammered by the ICO and their own customers. I mean, do you think there's a bit of fear as well around the people around the sort of reputational damage as well as conforming to the law, or do you think it's just the law?
I think there was a lot of fear because of the fines that could come from the law in the early days, but that's unfortunately, in my experience, been sort of debunked because it's only the real high-profile organisations that are getting undertakings or getting fines because of things that they've done, and it has turned into a very reputational damage limitation from what could happen. Although, I've never met a CISO or Security Information Security Officer that is saying they've got enough money to secure everything that they have. There's always we would like to do this, and even somebody at the top isn't using multi-factor authentication, and they've got all the admin credentials to the entire business and things. So there's still a real push and pull going on there, although it's becoming worse, I think, because of the advent of AI being in everything. It's everywhere. It's powering the technologies underpinning all the businesses and just being thrust upon us. I think it's getting worse, and there's still not enough money there, and there needs to be more money than there is even available at this point. So we're in a real weird spot right now. But driven from the law and become that problem even more. Yeah.
I've just got a quick follow-up on that, if you don't mind. So there's one thing about money and investment to make things more secure and robust, but what are the key points you think are critical in terms of getting the whole business to adopt this more protective view around data and being more conscious about how they handle it and what they do with it and where they take it? Because it's one thing getting leaders on board, but have you got any hints and tips and learnings to give people about getting people on board with why they also need to do their bit?
Yeah, there's a mindset shift here, which is a very curious thing that's I've noticed over the years, which is when you are working in an organization, you're processing the data. You're the person that's using that data. Great. And you're like, well, should I do it this way? Do I have to log in like this? It's a bit of an annoyance, And so you're not necessarily thinking about whose data that is. Now, take that employee out and go, well, if the organization you work for has your personal data using in the way that you're using it, would you be happy? And so it's that kind of shift, but it hasn't crossed that bridge yet. People don't think that way. They don't think, oh, if I'm working for Amazon, or if I'm purchasing something from Amazon, I expect them to protect my data, my card details in a certain way. It's almost a bit of a given. But then if I'm working for Amazon, it's because of company policy that I have to do it in a certain way. And I'm not thinking that I necessarily have that responsibility myself. It's in there, it's part of my package, but I've disassociated between the two. So the question is, would I be happy if my data was being used in the way that I'm using it?
That's a good question. Yeah.
And
I think that's go on.
I was just going to say that's a really good way to frame it, isn't it? For people to immediately understand and appreciate what data protection is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as well. We've kind of spent 10 minutes talking about sort of the companies and the way that large companies need to respond and the way they need to be. But I think sometimes I sort of feel like the rights of the individual are somehow forgotten, and I think sometimes it's confusing for them. So I know digital sovereignty is a big thing for you, James. I don't think everyone on our podcast kind of understands that. Do you want to just give us your view of what that means and kind of what the impact on the individual, positive and negative, is around that?
Yeah, so sovereignty is this idea that you can contain your data within a jurisdiction. So digital sovereignty in the UK, that would say your data is held in the UK, it doesn't go outside of the UK, and all the operations with that data is in the UK. Now, that's actually very, very difficult because of the hyperscalers like your Metas of the world, your Microsoft and Google, and it's all about settings within those organizations. We've seen the French government move to, I think it's a Linux-based system, to move away from Microsoft to become more sovereign. And there's kind of the whole idea of sovereignty is developed a bit further. Self-sovereignty has become a thing.
Okay.
So how do I contain everything about me in a location, and how do I know where it is and who is using it and how? And am I able to contain that use in a way that I only allow that? Now, that's kind of what GDPR is all about, but it's also not really happened because there's still so many sub-processes. Let's go back to Amazon again. How does Amazon hold your data? It's in a server that may be managed by another company that they're paying to hold it in that location. So you've got this supply chain substack to look at. So sovereignty is holding your data in a location that you have complete control over and complete choice over how it's going to be used at all times. Doesn't really happen right now, though.
Yeah, you can kind of see the gap between what GDPR was setting out to do and the practical reality of doing that. I mean, we see that on the things like right to be forgotten stuff, where it makes perfect sense. And then you look at it, for example, where we work at HE, and there'll be 58 systems. And Bob is the guy who understands system 53, and he left 10 years ago. And so I think that you can kind of understand what is being asked for, and you can kind of understand why people get frustrated how hard it is to do. You see that, I think, with subject access requests as well. I think it's interesting because we kind of see it from both sides. We sort of think it's the individual gets a poor experience, but then we also see it being weaponized sometimes. And I'm sure you've had some experience of that. I mean, again, you're the expert. I mean, where does it live? Do you think most people understand what their rights are? Do you think people abuse it? Do you think they just don't know? Is it too hard a question to answer?
I think people do understand that you can ask for a copy of your data. I think that's really out there. I think there have been a couple of MPs that have used that and brought it up in parliamentary questions as well. I think Nigel Farage made it front and centre, and so did Jacob Rees-Mogg. And so people do understand that, but I don't think they really understand the implications around the information that comes back to them. Right. Really, I mean, how do you unpick that and unpack that, and maybe need to complain about that? There's not necessarily that level of understanding. It's like, yes, you get a copy of it, but then what do I do with it? And then you've got to ask, well, why did I ask for it in the first place? And that's where it sort of falls down. And I was speaking to a friend of mine in the industry recently, just was saying, well, is the whole data subject access request process, is it broken? Because what you see is, yes, it is weaponized by people that are a bit miffed and unhappy with you or the organization. They just like, let's throw in a data subject access request, and you don't have to have a reason for doing it either. You don't have to tell them why. You can just ask. And it's been weaponized. I think most uses of it is weaponized. Now, that's not to say that there are people out there legitimately concerned and have been worried about how the data is being used, and they want to find out. Now, as one experience that was well publicised, in fact, in Labour, a couple of organisations during the 2024 general election, they'd set up these external facing systems for lots of people to be able to request a data subject access request from the general public. And so they'd fill in the form and it would go to all of the political parties. And so all political parties receive numerous thousands within a very short space of time. And that's, in my mind, I don't think that's really legitimate, because it's going through a third party that is doing it to affect the democratic process because of the timings. It was literally on the 1 month until polling day. That timing is not a coincidence. That is trying to disrupt a process. And I don't think that's legitimate use of it. And then again, if you are going through maybe a performance improvement path, and as an employee, there's, people will throw in a data subject access request. And then there's a proliferation of AI. AI is now making it very easy. I'm seeing lots of colleagues talking about really, really well-worded data subject access requests But half the tools that they're asking for access to or information from, the company doesn't use them, and so it's not well thought out. And I almost encourage people to push back and just ask for more information. And you're allowed to do that now and ask for more specific information as to what you're looking for because of Data Use and Access Act as well of 2025. So, yeah, I think it's mainly abused, unfortunately.
So expanding on that point about AI, James, what do you think what type of role do you think AI is playing in terms of the forward view around data protection? Is that something that is really on people's minds as something that needs to be very highly regulated and governed? I know we're in a Wild West at the moment as it's really taking off, but what's your view on the impact that it can have longer term?
I think people are worried about it being kind of highly governed, but they do want it governed. And in the UK, we don't have a law covering that. And we've had a couple of things happen in the UK within the last week. We've got a new Prime Minister, and now we've got an AI minister that is very specific. In fact, we've even seen the breakup of the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology in the UK, the government department, which was developing a governance strategy and a law there. Now, it does need regulation because I'm seeing two different sides of the coin here. One of them is AI is being used to build incredible tools. I've done some data protection work on a tool that will generate educational materials for SEND students up in Scotland. It's been trained on educational materials for that type of individual, and then you just type a prompt and it pops out. So it's like very, very specific to that need. And then you've got the other side of it where we're seeing Copilot pop up, Gemini pop up. In every Zoom meeting, there's some sort of AI note taking without necessarily having the right permissions for the use of that data or the right settings. It's just been thrust upon us. And then there's the whole concern with, well, I know if I see an AI generated data protection policy, my mindset is I disregard that completely because it's slop. It doesn't know what it's talking about. And I think a lot of people are now getting to that place where they don't trust it, they don't want it, they don't like it, even though there's this huge benefit that could come from it. And so we're in a very, very weird stage. And not to mention there's this kind of the undercurrent of, is there going to be a financial crash because of the billions that are being pumped into these companies as well? And how is it going to affect us? Not to mention the trustworthiness of the individuals that run those companies is becoming a forefront at people's minds as to whether or not they want to use a system or not. And so we've got all of that at play. I hope that answered your question. I think I went off on a couple of tangents there, but I think that's where we are.
It did, yeah.
It's kind of good because we're sort of stuck between Skynet on the one hand with AI stuff breaking out of its own sandbox. And I know that's a more nuanced argument than it is, and then into sort of almost like digital Luddites. It's like I don't want anything to do with it. I mean, I think personally our view is that we see a lot of AI written stuff, and we're thinking if you can't be bothered to write it, we're not going to bother to read it. That's kind of where we're at. I mean, there are places I think it's really useful, but this idea, that thing where Deloitte got caught in Australia for essentially just going out and using AI. And when I used to work for Deloitte, that's what we did with consultants. We sent them out to change the name on the sort of report, whereas now it just goes out and generates it with AI. Same business model, just slightly less evil. So I think it's a real problem. Like I say, it feels very unregulated. I think. And I think it's undermining trust in some of the things that years ago I was involved a bit. We talked about with Care ID, and I know this is stuff that you did about this idea of using public anonymized data for the greater good. And I know that's something you have have a passion for. Do you want to talk about that? Because again, it sort of feels to me like it's a huge opportunity, but also it's kind of terrifying depending on kind of who are we trusting with our data.
Yeah, I mean, I come off the back of it. In the last couple of weeks, I went to a conference in Rotterdam, and it's called the International Population Data Linkage Network Conference, IPDLN, if I remember the acronym correctly. And it brought together scientists and researchers from all over the world, but all about how do we share data securely and for public benefit. And things like there's an organization called Odyssey, nothing to do with the movie that's just come out, but and it's based in Holland. And what the Dutch government have allowed is for Odyssey to collate all digital ID public data into one location to do enormous national research for the benefit of the country and the individuals that live there. And it's pulled it all together into one location. And they're allowing access, so very secure, trusted research environment access for researchers within very secure parameters. They are credentialed up to the gills, if you like, to do this analysis. And we just don't have anything like that in the UK.
No.
And we have people pushing back on digital ID, saying this is a travesty. What if we had a totalitarian state come in and just use all our data against us, and it becomes Skynet all over again and things? But there are issues, especially in the UK, without a singular point of being able to recognise who a person is, because we end up having to duplicate maybe a passport, a driver's license, as a front end, as a gateway into all of these services. And then we get worried that, well, I've just signed in here, but why do I have to do it again to go over here? Why am I duplicating that? But oh no, I won't have a digital ID, won't do that. It's like, but that will solve that problem. And that's the only problem it's trying to solve. It's not trying to build a big data lake of everything to make decisions upon you that you think will be detrimental to yourself. But then you go, well, why have Holland done it in this way and it works and nobody's concerned about it? So wait a minute, there are national infrastructures that definitely work, that are providing a benefit back to individuals without harming them, and then producing better services out of it. Because if you refocus the right money to the right places, it's going to be delivered in the right way. And I really hope that, the government digital services that I think still exists, but even though DCIT doesn't, is developing those things in the background, because the potential is incredible. And we could have a better society than we do now. I am very passionate about it, and I see the benefits. But there are other concerns out there. You've got kind of the federated data platform, which is the NHS consolidation of all 70 years worth of health data. And for me, the research being conducted on that. And there are these environments that are happening. A lot of them are funded by Health Data Research UK, where you can get better analysis of stroke victims or cancers and reduce the incidence of XYZ. And it's like, wow, why don't we just point all our resources? But the thing is, people don't know about it, and they get worried about it. And then there's not enough transparency about the uses of the data and how secure it really is. And I'm really inspired, and there was a keynote from a gentleman called Ben Goldacre at the conference, and he runs
we've had Ben on. He's brilliant.
You've had Ben on, have you?
Not on, I've had him at a conference. He's amazing.
He's amazing. He's amazing. Now, he's absolutely at the global forefront of how you get access to data in a secure way for the benefit of society. And he's created something called Open Safely. And Open Safely, it is a gated access to NHS data that is totally secure, but also transparent, because they only let you do it if you publish your coding on GitHub as well, and make that openly available. And there's so many nuances in there. It's like, wow, that is the gold standard, global gold standard. And if we could do that with all administrative data, not just health data, but many different types of data, well, we just advance as a society. And that's the bit that's very strange in my mind, because the technology exists, the governance and the legislation exists to enable it as well. What is the problem? The problem is the public trust of the use of the data by the government. How do we change that?
Yeah,
Sorry, I was just going to ask, do you think some of that lack of that resistance from the public is that they don't really understand what the government has and why they have it. So it's that thing, isn't it? When you know what someone's got, then you may be more protective or otherwise over it. But I think maybe people sign things and subscribe to things and they don't actually see that as data, so they don't know that it can be created and held somewhere and something can be done with it. Do you think there's something around education for people to understand what data is, where it goes and why it's used?
Absolutely, yes. So if you have access to maybe the NHS app, it's being developed in the background where you can see your entire patient record from almost birth to death now, and you can start to see where that is. And so, well, why don't we have that for the entirety of birth to death with our own records? I mean, I've still got a paper birth certificate. Surely that's digitized somewhere, and I want to know where it is, why it is, and where it's being used. And I got myself along to another conference because I'm just a junkie for these things, which was the Solid Symposium. Solid is Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the internet. It's his initiative to build what's called solid pods. The solid pod concept is around having that birth to death life cycle. Maybe that's not the right word, but every moment there is data created about you from any system, government or other, you can hold it in your pod, and you'll be able to then have the ability to give access or not to those organizations about you. Therefore, you have this ability, and if you make it pretty, a very easy, tangible way to see all the data that's held about you, where it is, why it is, and then to be able to make changes as needed or restrict access as needed in the palm of your hand. Now, surely that's where we should be, because we now know we've all got kind of Google wallets, Samsung wallets. We can pay via near frequency contact through a wallet. Why isn't a digital identity wallet for every man, woman and child in the UK to have our data stored there throughout our entire life cycle? And then it just becomes easy. The problem there is there's a ton of data. And the other problem is there's a ton of systems. So how do you make those systems, the APIs for all those systems? You literally have to go, well, you need a new API for your driving license, a new API for this online platform and things. And so it becomes totally unwieldy. Now, I'm not sitting here saying we fixed it. It's like we haven't. That's the thing. We haven't. And I really hope that AI, quantum, we get to those places where it then becomes second nature. And you get public buy-in because it then makes everything easy, which is, dare I say it, dare I be really controversial, what I felt digital ID in the UK was all about as well, making it easier access and easier use.
Yeah, there is a short-term versus long-term thing there, isn't it? I mean, I think it's interesting as well because what you just talked about that, I know it's not digital sovereignty, but it kind of would give people a feeling of sovereignty of their own data. And I think I just think about things like Palantir, and like it's the trust of people. It's like if it's Tim Berners-Lee, if it's Ben Goldacre, absolutely. If it's Palantir, absolutely not. I mean, because that's the other thing, isn't it? Is you can sell a concept and get people to kind of buy into why there's value, but if they don't trust the people doing it, then I think that for me is the other thing we have to overcome, and it is those late stage capitalism. I mean, I don't want those people having access to my data. Whatever guardrails are in place. So I think it's kind of a difficult one to square that circle, isn't it? To find the right people to implement the technology that's going to keep you safe.
Yeah, it has come down to almost personality politics.
Yeah,
who do we trust and why do we trust them? And I think the more transparent those individuals are and more open they are, then we're more likely to trust them. Now, there's a flip side to that. If they're really open, you find things that like that's a little bit off. Maybe you won't. But I think there are concepts and thoughts around how to do that in a way where it makes people go, yeah. Ben Goldacre, like you said, and Tim Berners-Lee, having the right, because what is it really? It's branding, personal branding around them to go, I trust them, I buy into them. Yeah. And they have set other foundational elements beneath them to say, well, if I lose my mind, then I can't actually affect it because I've set up this foundation beneath to go, well, we won't allow that. Dare I say, that's why the founding fathers of the US wrote the Constitution in the US, because it's the foundational pillars to stop a tyrannical government overtaking the entirety of the United States. So you've got this thing here. So if you have that built in and you have that trust of a public because of your persona, then yeah, absolutely right. And maybe that's where we need to go. Maybe that's where our politics needs to go. And again, is that reflective of what's happened in the UK with the flip from Keir Starmer to Andy Burnham? Because there's arguments there. It's like, wait a minute, we've got a new Prime Minister, we need a new general election. Is it enough for Maker Field people to have voted for him suddenly to become Prime Minister? Maybe, maybe not. But then there's the other side of it. It's like, well, he comes across as a more trustworthy individual and more personable. And do we quite like that? And so the public aren't going to be shouting that we need general election. So it's like looking at it, like at all those layers, and what do we trust? We have to trust individuals now. It is that. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, I think that's You got any thoughts on that, Rav?
No, I just think it describes really well just the environment that we're all in at the moment, because there is so much. There's a lot tangled into the conversation around all of this, isn't there? There isn't just a single answer to everything, because data can be weaponized and is politicized, and there is so much around the AI conversation. It is just very messy, and I don't know. I'm glad I'm not the one to be sat at the table helping to solve some of all of this, to be quite honest.
I think maybe we should come back another podcast and have a deep. I mean, I don't kind of want to do the AI clickbait thing, but I think it would be interesting to talk about the kind of AI human interface, which is what don't think people talk enough about. I think that would be a really interesting conversation to have with you next time, James, around sort of, how do we create the trust in that conversation. So definitely that'd be good fun. But I think, as ever, a really fantastic conversation. We've gone massively over our time, and that's absolutely fine. But thank you for being on again, James. We'll make sure we get you published this time, and we'll hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, James. Well, thank you, James, for joining us and sharing all of your insights on data protection, digital sovereignty, AI, and the growing importance of trust in how organisations use and manage data. It was a really interesting conversation that actually highlighted how complex the modern data landscape has become and why our understanding of our data is becoming ever-increasingly important. In our next episode, we'll be exploring something which actually is very related to what James was talking about and is at the heart of a lot of the challenges that we see in our organisations. And that is documenting our data through data landscape maps. So we'll be looking at what they are, why they're an essential tool for organisations, and how they can help create a clearer understanding of the data used across the business. So if you've ever asked a question similar to, what data do we have? Where is it? Who do I ask about it? Make sure you join us for episode 7. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, follow and share. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on the Connected Data Podcast.